I whispered that I didn't love him anymore, but didn't know he would ruin me. Men are scum. I never imagined that my husband would ruin my life because I told him I didn't love him again and that I wanted a divorce. Hey, Reddit, for the sake of privacy, I will be using fake names. My husband Dave, male, 35, and I, female, 30, have been married for 3 years now. My marriage to Dave was loveless. I can't remember any day I was actually happy in the course of our marriage. I lost everything because of my stupidity. I don't know what came over that I started cheating on my husband. I thought my husband would fall on his knees and beg me when I told him I didn't love him anymore and threatened to divorce him, but instead of begging, he divorced me instead. Never in my wildest imagination would Ewell have believed that the man I married 3 years ago would be capable of such a dubious act. Truth be told, I married Dave because of his money. I met Dave through an older friend of mine. For Dave, it was love at first sight, but for me, it wasn't. I never wanted to marry Dave since I wasn't in love with him, but my parents assured me that there was more to marriage than love. They told me I would grow to love Dave as time went by, but all that never happened. Dave is a gentle, caring, and kind-hearted man. Physically, he is not my spec. He is short and bald-headed, but he is a very generous man. His generosity is what made me marry him. Dave and I got just 4 months after dating. After our marriage, I discovered that my parents lied to me and that love was an essential ingredient for any marriage to work. Dave is a nice man, no doubt, but I wasn't attracted to him, so anything he does irritates me. The more he tried to make me happy, the more I distanced myself from him. Dave made sure I never lacked anything. He provided me with everything I needed, but all that didn't move me. I wanted more. Dave wasn't a romantic guy, but he always makes sure we go on dinner dates every Friday. I dreaded every Friday night because of the dinner date reason being that I didn't want to be seen with Dave outside. I always felt ashamed any time we went outside together. No matter how I tried, I couldn't bring myself to love Dave. I felt all alone in the marriage. My loneliness pushed me to start having an affair just a year after our wedding. I started having an affair with Tom. Tom is the complete opposite of Dave. Tom is tall, cute, and loving. Tom had everything I wanted in a man, just that Tom was not as rich as Dave. Tom was jobless. I was even the one paying most of his bills. I fell in love with Tom the second I met him. It was love at first sight. Tom has this irresistible charm I can't explain. My affair with Tom continued over the years. Tom would always beg me to leave my husband for him. Initially, I thought that was impossible, but soon I began thinking about everything and concluded that life was too short for me to spend it in a loveless marriage. So I started mapping out my exit plan from the marriage. I started saving money in Tom's account. And I was discreet in my dealings because I knew there was no way Dave would forgive me if he ever found out that I was cheating on him. Tom was a complete lover boy. He always knew how to put a smile on my face. Ever since I started going out with Tom, I glowed differently because it seemed I finally found my soulmate. Even though Tom wasn't rich, he still made sure he spent the little he had on me. Time passes so fast anytime we are together. Sometimes I wish time would just stand still. Tom and I had so many things in common. We viewed life from the same perspective. If only I'd met Tom before I met Dave, maybe things would have been a little bit different. Dave is a realtor, so he was hardly around. He was always on one trip or the other, so I had time to meet with my lover Tom whenever I wanted. Sometimes he does come over to the house whenever Dave isn't around. Everything was going on smoothly until one day when Dave arrived unannounced. I bet it was our nosy neighbors that alerted him. So Dave arrived in the middle of the night on one fateful day without any notice. On that fateful night, Tom was around. I heard the doorbell ring. I was shocked because I wasn't expecting anyone. I decided to go look. And behold, I saw my husband standing outside at the front of the door. I froze for some seconds. I honestly thought I was dreaming. Dave pushed me aside and ran upstairs. It was at that point that it dawned on me that everything was real. Dave ran up and straight to our bedroom. Luckily for me, Tom had exited the room and hid himself in the kitchen. While Dave ran up to our bedroom, Tom quickly ran out from the kitchen into the living room and exited the building immediately. Here's the thing. Tom and I had always joked about this scenario countless times. In fact, we had planned what we would do in such a scenario. Tom and I had come down from the bedroom, so while I was going to check who was at the door, he went to hide in the kitchen because that was the last place anyone would go when they came visiting. So while Dave was rushing upstairs, I opened the door wide for Tom to run out. That was how I escaped being caught on that fateful day. Dave, on the other hand, felt like a fool when he came to our bedroom and didn't see anyone. His spirit immediately weakened. The way he ran up like someone who was about to catch a thief only to be disappointed when he met an empty room. Dave took his time to move from one room to another. He checked all the rooms, even the kitchen and bathroom weren't left out of the search. When he was done, I calmly asked him why he was turning the house upside down and if he misplaced something. All of a sudden, he became dumb. He couldn't utter a word. At that moment, it dawned on me that Dave suspected me and that someone must have alerted him about my affair with Tom. I seized the opportunity and decided to turn everything around. I started crying while accusing Dave of not trusting me. I called him all sorts of names. I told him he was insecure and trying to project his insecurities on me. Dave apologized for his actions. He told me he was sorry and promised to trust me moving forward, but deep down, I knew he didn't buy any of my lies because I knew him too well. At that point, I felt bad for him. Dave was a good man and didn't deserve what I was doing to him. After that experience, I decided to end my relationship with Tom and just make my marriage work. I stopped contacting Tom all through that period, but immediately Dave went on another business trip, and somehow I found myself back with Tom. This time I decided to be very discreet. I stopped Tom from coming over to my place. Instead, I would go over to his place. Tom, on the other hand, was pressuring me to divorce Dave and get half of his property, so that we could be together fully. Truth be told, the thought of divorcing Dave scares me. I don't know if it's because I know I wouldn't get a penny. After all, Dave and I signed a prenup before our wedding, or the fact that things might not work out between me and Tom when he finds out I'm broke and only living off my husband's money. Tom asked me to choose between him and Dave. He told me that if I truly loved him as I claimed, I would divorce Dave. What Tom doesn't know is that I might lose everything after the divorce. I have not told Tom that Dave and I signed a prenup before our wedding. I don't think he would take it well if he found out. I don't want to lose Tom, and also on the other hand, I don't want to lose my comfort in all the luxury I enjoy by divorcing Dave. I'm in a state of a fiasco right now. I need advice, guys. What do you guys think I should do? Should I divorce Dave and move on with Tom, or I should end my relationship with Tom and just face my marriage? I would be in the comment section, so please be nice. Update. Hey Reddit, I'm back again. So I read your opinions, but unfortunately, I decided to go on with what my heart says. I decided to divorce my husband so I could move on with my lover. So, on one fateful day after Dave had arrived from one of his trips, I told him, "Dear, I don't love you anymore and I want a divorce." To my greatest surprise, Dave didn't even say a word. He just smirked and moved about his day like nothing happened. The next while I was still trying to figure out what was going through Dave's mind and why he was so quiet. Even though I told him I didn't love him anymore and that I wanted a divorce, Dave's lawyer arrived and slammed me with divorce papers. When I saw him that morning, I was shocked because we weren't expecting him, and Dave never mentioned that his lawyer was coming. When he handed me the divorce papers, I asked him what the paper was for, and he told me to open it so I could see for myself. I hurriedly opened the paper, and to my greatest surprise, it was divorced papers. I was shocked to my bones. I couldn't even believe my eyes. I became dumb all of a sudden. I had a lot of things I wanted to say, but I couldn't utter a word. Soon, Dave arrived. He had gone out very early that morning. Immediately he stepped in, he started throwing my things out. At that point, he dawned on me that this wasn't a prank. I held Dave and started pleading. I told him I didn't mean what I said about divorcing him and that I was only joking. It was at that moment that he started talking. He told me how he had been suspecting me for quite some time now and was only looking for the right opportunity to send me out. He reminded me about that day he arrived unannounced. He told me a neighbor and friend had told him that I usually bring one particular guy over to the house whenever he wasn't around. He told me how he pretended to go on a trip just to go lodge in a hotel, and that on that particular day, the neighbor had called him that my guest had arrived, and that was why he stormed the house unannounced. He told me that even though he didn't catch the stupid guy red-handed, there were signs that I had a guest over. He told me how he spotted 2 glasses of wine in the bedroom and also found cheap male underwear that wasn't his in the bathroom. He told me that he had always known I was cheating on him and that he was carefully mapping out his revenge plan. He also told me how he installed a CCTV camera in the house and that he has numerous unclad videos of me and Tom. At this point, my mouth was wide open. I fell on my knees and started pleading for mercy, but he pushed me away and continued throwing my things out. I honestly didn't know that Dave was aware of the fact that I had been cheating on me, but decided to keep quiet. I was perplexed. I honestly didn't know everything would generate to this level. I thought Dave would be devastated. and be the one crying and begging me not to leave him. I didn't know he had been planning on how to divorce me for a long time now. I told Dave there was no way I was going to divorce him, but he threatened to release all the unclad videos of me and Tom he had on social media. Desperate to protect what was left of my dignity, I decided to sign the divorce papers. After signing the divorce papers, Dave promised to make my life a living hell. He asked me to watch and see how he was going to ruin my life. I picked up all my things and left for my parents' place. They were shocked to see me because I didn't inform them that I was coming. I narrated everything that had happened to them. To say my parents were disappointed in me was an understatement. The look on their faces says it all. I didn't need a soothsayer to tell me that my parents felt like disowning me at that moment. They called me all sorts of names you can think of, and they asked me to go back and plead with Dave to forgive. I told them there was no need and that I didn't even love him anyway. I told my parents I was in love with someone else, and maybe divorcing Dave isn't a bad thing after all. At that point, my dad lost it and slapped me. He said he would never approve of me getting married to a lowlife who can't even feed himself. My parents asked me to pack up my bags and that they were taking me back to Dave to plead on my behalf. I got so angry at my parents' persistence for me to go back to Dave that I angrily started exchanging words with them. I told them it was their greed that made them push me to get married to someone I didn't love. I told them I would have ended up fine if they had not forced me to get married to Dave because of their selfish desires. I told them I wasn't going back and walked out on them. The following day, Dave arrived at my parents' house. I thought he came to beg me to come back to him and that he had realized that he couldn't leave without me, but unfortunately, Dave's mission was different. I forgot to mention to you guys that Dave was the one who bought the house my parents were living in. After our wedding, Dave gifted my parents a house. On that day, he arrived with security and asked my parents to evacuate the house immediately. Everyone was shocked before we could say a word. The security guy had started throwing my parents things. The only things my parents came into the house with were their clothes, because Dave furnished the house before he gifted it to my parents. What broke my heart into pieces was when my parents went on their knees to plead with Dave to forgive me and let them stay in the house, but unfortunately, all their pleas went on deaf ears. Dave ignored my parents and continued perpetrating his evil act. I never knew the man I married was capable of such dubious character. I thought Dave was an angel in a human form. I never knew he was the devil incarnate. Only a devil would be so heartless to the point of chasing middle-aged people out of the house he had given them. Seeing my parents wailing broke me into pieces. For the first time, I felt helpless. Never in my wildest imagination did I think that a day like this would ever come. But I bet Dave had always prepared for a day like this because the house receipt was in his name. Thinking about it, everything makes sense now on why Dave refused to give me or my parents the house receipt. At that moment, it dawned on me that I didn't marry a simp. After all, he was always one step ahead of me. Indeed, I was the fool. I joined my parents and siblings in pleading with Dave for forgiveness, but Dave acted like we were non-existent and continued giving orders for our things to be thrown out. With no sign of Dave tempering justice with mercy, my parents and I picked up our belongings and headed to our old house. I felt bad for my parents. From living in a beautiful apartment to now being back to their house that leaks whenever it rains. At this moment, it dawned on me that I'd let my parents down. Soon the divorce proceedings started, and it wasn't as I had anticipated. The procedure was mentally draining for me, and worst of all was that Dave made sure he frustrated me. He took everything he ever bought for me, even the engagement ring and wedding rings that I was hoping to sell, and took the money to start up something. My shameless husband took everything. The whole situation kind of revealed who Dave was. It revealed his true colors, and behind that kind of man is a monster. The more time passed, it became clearer that Dave was on a mission to frustrate me. Even the joint savings account we had together. Dave cleared everything. I was now left with nothing. Update. Hey Reddit. I'm back to update my story. I didn't expect it to get so much attention, and I never thought I would make an update, but seeing how invested everyone is, I feel it's best to let you all know what has been going on. Soon, the divorce proceedings were over, and I thought I was finally free from Dave's torture, but I was wrong. A few days after our divorce, Dave still went ahead to leak my unclad pictures on social media. I went through another hell. For days I couldn't step outside. I was ashamed of myself. 3 months after everything had calmed down, I decided to go back to Tom so we could continue our relationship, but to my greatest surprise, the fool told me he was no longer interested and that he had moved on. He told me he now has a serious girlfriend he was planning on settling down with. At first, I thought he was pulling my legs, but soon I realized that he was dead serious when a lady arrived. Tom authoritatively asked me to leave his house. He introduced me to the lady as his cousin. When I asked him about the money I was saving in his account, he told me he had an emergency, so he used the money. At that point, I almost fainted because that was my last hope. I told Tom I wasn't leaving his house until he provided me with every penny I had saved in his account. He threatened to call the cops if I refused to leave. At that point, I wanted to create a scene, but I didn't want to get into more trouble because I already had a lot on my plate. Just as I was about to leave, Tom's girlfriend followed me out and told me how he and Tom had been dating for years. She told me Tom only used me to get some cash. At that moment, I started crying. I felt used and trashed. I went home that day lost and hopeless. I couldn't think straight, and I didn't know what to do. I felt betrayed by the one I loved and risked everything for. At that point, it was like the scale in my eyes had fallen off. I started regretting everything. I felt bad for myself and most importantly, my parents. If I could turn back the hands of time, trust me, I would have done things differently. If I'd learned to love my husband, maybe I would still be married by now, but I let my lust destroy my home. After giving everything careful thought, I realized that I wronged Dave, so I decided to go see him and apologize properly for the pain I had caused him. I arrived at the house and met new faces. When I inquired about what was happening, they told me they were the new owners of the house. Apparently Dave had sold the house. I was told by security that Dave had relocated to another city. I tried getting his new contact details, but no one was willing to give it to me. I called his other number several times, but there was no response. I decided to go to his parents' house so they could at least give me his new contact, and if possible help me plead for him to forgive me and maybe accept me back, but nothing prepared me for the embarrassment Dave's mom gave me. First off, she didn't allow me to step inside. She came out and started hauling insults at me. She even called me a gold digger and accused me of ruining her son's life. She told me how she never liked me from the beginning and how she had a reservation about me. She categorically said she was happy Dave listened to her advice about signing a prenup before our wedding. She said she was glad that I was now back in the slum where I belong. I was dumbfounded by everything she was saying. I told her I was sorry and asked her to please forgive me and give me Dave's contact. She told me that would never happen and that it would be over her dead body. When I saw how adamant Dave's mom was to embarrass me, I hurriedly left the place to avoid any altercation, but I was still determined to talk to Dave. The next day, I met with Dave's childhood friend and pleaded with him to please help me with Dave's new contact. He was blatantly refused at first, but after much persuasion from me, he gave me Dave's new contact information and house address in Los Angeles. After calling Dave several times without any response, I decided to go visit him in Los Angeles. I drove all the way from California to Los Angeles. I know it sounds crazy, but I was desperate. Something told me Dave would forgive, and we can start all over again when I finally apologize for how I wronged him. Soon, I arrived at the residence and I was shocked. I knew Dave was rich, but buying a house in a gated community was another level of richness. I rang the doorbell and a lady opened the door for me. When I asked who she was, she introduced herself to me as Dave's girlfriend. Just as we were still talking, Dave arrived. If looks could kill, I would have been dead by now. He was fuming and boiling with anger when he saw me. He asked me how I got his home address, and just as I was about to open my mouth, he pushed me out of his house. He warned me to stop spamming his phone with calls and messages and that he has moved on. I told him I only wanted to apologize for how things ended between us. At that point, he looked me in the face and told me he would never forgive me and that I should get lost. I was humiliated. I left there with my head bowed on the ground. On my way back home that day, I cried hot tears. I couldn't believe how quick Dave moved on. I mean, it was just 6 months after our divorce and he already had a lady living with him. Worst of all, the lady was pregnant. Maybe I was wrong about everything. Maybe Dave never really loved me as he claimed, because if he did, he wouldn't have moved on as quickly as he did. Honestly, I felt betrayed. That's my story, guys. Everything still feels like a dream, and I hope that I will wake up from this horrible nightmare one day.
Hey there, guys. I've been keeping this down for a long time now. It has been almost 10 years since this happened, and I think it's now time I start to tell my story. This might get pretty long because all the events that I'm about to narrate have long occurred, so that means that unlike most of the stories I normally read on this Reddit, there won't be updates. My ex-wife betrayed me and I lost my marbles. Some time ago, I was married to a lady named Caroline. She was a career-driven lady and one of those strong independent women who only cared about her career. She wasn't always like that. I don't know, something about the job she got after we got married made her like that. We got married young, she was 24 and I was 27. We decided to hold off on having kids because we wanted to spend a few years enjoying each other's company. I had suggested it and she agreed because she thought we weren't yet mature enough to handle raising kids. We decided to wait until we were married 5 years. She got that job 2 years into our marriage. I remember her first day at work. She came back so happy and full of immense admiration for her coworkers. She couldn't stop telling me everything she had learned from the first day at the office. What did she tell? Well, let's start from the fact that it was a female-dominated workspace, which I didn't really care much about until she said they wanted to make it a female-only thing, but they needed the men to run the things they couldn't. Things that were heavy-duty. I thought that was weird, seeing her joke about how her coworkers spent most of their lunch break shitting men. I get women empowerment and all, but that seemed to me like taking it too far. Due to that, I started to get a feeling that I wouldn't like her stay at the company. I also knew that it would be almost impossible to persuade her to quit working there if my fears ever became reality. Though I had my takebacks, I was really happy for her. She finally got to work a job she wanted and had dreamt of. I hated the way she was miserable during the year she worked as a teacher, and I was happy she had gotten something that made her happy to wake up each passing day. The weeks passed, with her getting more enthusiastic about her work life with each passing day. I won't lie, I started to get a little jealous. Not a lot of people were still giggy about working for more than 2 months. There's always the initial, "I love working here" stage, but I didn't always last that long, mine sure didn't. Her joy about work was nice, meant we got to get freaky in the other room often, which was wild. She never had any complaints about her work, except for a few customers being customers, which was something I was happy was going right for her. Now the other thing I didn't like about where she worked started to rear its head. Most of the workers were career-driven feminists who were all single past the age of 35. I felt that at the age of 23, she was way too young and could potentially be malleable or brainwashed into thinking that she made a mistake marrying early. Also, I hoped that she didn't start to model their single lifestyle, because she looked up to a lot of them. Now the funny thing is, the conversations she had with them, at least the ones I knew of, mostly centered around their careers. They also had conversations about other things though, but they mostly spoke about how they wanted to grow their business to the highest of heights. She told me a lot of things about them, how her boss, a 49-year-old woman as of then, always told her next step was this, or that other one, which were all always something about making more money and becoming the most popular or influential person that bore her name. I don't remember the name, but my ex-wife always said the name with so much respect then. Well, slowly they started to tell her things and she started to listen. She started to want to be like these women. She wanted to become an influential person herself. I tried to talk to her, to tell her that I loved her ambition, but those women weren't women she should aspire to be like. I tried to talk to her, show her more influential women, who were able to make names for themselves while still being in a committed relationship. Funny enough, they always talked her up for being the youngest, but still the only one who was married. There were days when she would come back more excited than normal, because a coworker, one of whom she looked up to, had told her she'd happily swap lives with her. So it seemed they all wanted to get married someday, but one thing that most of the women didn't want was, you guessed, kids. She had started dropping subtle hints that she didn't want kids now. I knew it was because of her work environment. The only people who had kids were the people who did the maintenance, IT and other stuff. The women who worked with the main team, which she was a part of, didn't. At this point, we were drawing closer to the time we gave before we started to try for kids. I paid no mind to whatever hints and signs she dropped and decided that she'd either tell me herself or we move on as planned. After our 5th anniversary, we talked about her going off birth control. She disagreed. I laughed, to be honest, but I didn't find anything funny about her disagreement. She told me a lot of things that her group of undesirables had said to her about having kids, how the only thing the man had to worry about was the initial, which the men liked. Every other thing was on the women. She talked on and on about how she felt bringing a child into the world was only going to slow her pace. At this point, she had already started climbing up the corporate ladder. It was disheartening to see the woman I loved, who was always a mom, who always loved nurturing, who wanted to have kids before we even got married, turn into something like this, something I couldn't explain in just 3 years of working at that place. The bunch of undesirables, as I started calling her coworkers, had indoctrinated her with their undesirable ideas. They had turned my woman into your average deluded feminist. What was worse? She cited the fact that she was the one who earned the bulk of the money we spent and the money we had in our joint account. Low blow that was, if you ask me. We talked about this for several months. She had started telling me the things her mates at the office were telling her, that I was unknowingly becoming a part of the problem, that I couldn't see past my patriarchal instincts which were meant to oppress women. There's no way she thought me wanting kids was oppression, was what I thought. Unknown to me, this woman was already far gone. This conversation went on for a longer period of time than I expected. It took her a few months, but on my birthday, November the 27th, 12 years ago, she brought her birthday gift to me. She had gone off birth control. I was happy, really happy. It was now time for me to make little McLean babies. Unknown to me, that was where the evil deeds started. We tried for 2 years for a baby. At this point, if I was given just one child, I'd have bitten the hand off of whoever offered it. We went to different family clinics, met with different fertility experts, and did tests on each other. Deep down I thought I was being punished for being an absolute player in 7 years from 17 till 24 when I first met Caroline. I had gone to see a neurologist, just to be sure I was even able to get a woman pregnant. She went to see the people she would see to get a fertility test done, or at least that was what she told me. When we got results, we were both really fertile and the specialists only said we should try more so that it would surely happen. Hey, more sex. I'll take what I can get. Over the next 2 years, we still got no results. Then unfortunately, and also fortunately for me, she got involved in an accident, a fatal accident that claimed the lives of several of her coworkers as they went on a convention in another state. I was chilling at home that day. 'Twas a Saturday evening, so I was back home from working. She wasn't home, so everywhere was extremely quiet. I was sitting in the living room doing nothing at all, just sitting. You men know how soul-pleasing a quiet house is. I got a call from a hospital in the state where she was. She was involved in an accident and was one of the few who they got to on time and were saved. I was told she was put on life support but needed to be operated on before the next 3 days or she might not make it. I rushed down to the hospital with every possible thing that I thought would be needed. It took me till 10 a.m. the next day to get there, but I didn't stop driving until I got to the hospital, driving for more than 12 hours straight. Immediately I got there, I rushed to the where I met my ex-wife. Seeing her in that state, it was pretty hard to contain myself. The thoughts of losing her taunted me. I was scared. I handed whatever documents the hospital needed and they started the surgery. 2 days later she was stable, she could talk and all. I stayed by her side at the hospital all through the days. We were talking and laughing when the doctor came in to check on her, as he did at least once a day. As he made to leave, I asked when she'd be discharged. He responded saying, "Very soon, I just need to prescribe some medication and checkups at the hospital where you live, but before that I'd need to know if there's anything that could affect the medication I'd be prescribing. We don't want to accidentally cripple or even worse, do in a patient we just spent 12 hours in the operating room with." "Anything like what?" Caroline asked. "You know, things like ulcer, pregnancy, diabetes, and aborted pregnancies. Anything that may have not been in the medical history." "No," I responded. "There are no health obstructions." The doctor said okay and headed out of the room. He didn't make it out the door when my ex-wife called him back. "Wait," she said. "There is something." The doctor turned and walked back towards us, asking to hear what it was. She looked at me. I could see in her face that she was afraid to say whatever it was she wanted to say. She hesitated a little, then I nudged her to say what it was. "I had an abortion last week." "Hold on a minute, what?" I didn't even know when I had shouted this out. "Please don't stream the patient, you don't want to risk us having a setback." I controlled myself. The doctor took notes and left. It was now my turn to ask the questions. "What do you mean you had an abortion?" You had an abortion when we were desperately trying to have kids for 2 years? What made you make such a decision without talking to me first? She started crying, saying she never wanted me to find out this way. That wasn't what I asked her. I told her to answer only the questions I asked, nothing more. She started to talk about the years she spent at the company. She talked about the fact that the women she walked with were all against having children, how they didn't want anyone to be dependent on them. She told me how they called children leeches, parasites. She told me how she had told them about our fights, and how one of them suggested she agree with me but get abortions behind my back. What he doesn't know won't hurt him. She said the lady told her that she might only have to do it once and that I might give up after trying for 6 months to a year. I was really disappointed at her. Are these really the people she looked up to? How many? I asked her. She shook her head, saying she didn't want to answer, that I'd leave her if she said how many. I looked at this lady, at this murderer. I asked again, how many? She shook her head, saying, no, 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 no. How many? 7. She said, finally caving. Wow, 7. 7 abortions, all the while she watched me blame myself for us not being able to have kids, and all the while we could have had maybe 2 kids running around the crib. Wow. I walked out of the hospital. As I headed home, I thought about the whole thing. It took me 17 hours to get back home, as I used that time to think about the whole thing. I imagined having 7 children running around my house. I closed all my windows and screamed for a long time, hoping I'd scream away the pain. After successfully giving myself a headache, I calmed down. I decided I needed to get back at her. The only reasonable thing that came to mind was to ruin the career she willingly killed my kids to have. I remembered her telling me once about how the company was evading tax the whole time they existed. She had briefed me on how they did it, and because she was now CFM, Chief Financial Manager, she was actively involved in it all. I knew what I had to do. When I got home, I went straight for her keys and headed to her office. Since the majority of the undesirables were a part of the accident and those who weren't were at the convention, I took my chance. I went for all the files I could find that could serve as tangible proof of their tax evasion, like records of monthly profits, budgets, anything I came across that seemed like evidence, I took. I scanned copies and saved them on my device. Then I called my lawyer, told him how things were. I evenly shared the money in the joint account and I left the house to her. I didn't even know what to do there anymore. Everything in there reminded me of her. By the end of the week, it was all ready, the IRS had been alerted and proof presented to them, the divorce papers were ready. I went out to meet my realtor, to find a better place to move into. The time I had spent there was already too much. By the time I had gotten home, Caroline was back from the hospital. She got up and rushed to me when she saw me. I put my hand out at a stop sign. I don't want to hear whatever it is you have to say. The papers on the table are divorce papers. You've been served. Henceforth, we will only be conversing via our lawyers, I said to her. She tried to beg me, tried to explain herself, but I wasn't having it. I went straight to the room, reached for my bag of clean clothes, and headed right out. I only stopped at the door to say these last words to her. Listen, love, you should be ashamed of yourself. You broke my trust and went against nature, all because of your stupid career. Well, I hate to break it to you, but I've alerted the IRS, so I hope your company has made a ton of profit, because you better call Saul. I hope you regret the decision you made, and I hope that whenever you look in the mirror you see yourself for who you really are. A murderer. I left again. This time for good. I slept at my office for a week before I was able to find a new place that was within my price range and mortgage plan. In 2 months our divorce was final. Just a day after we were officially divorced, I heard on the local news radio about an all-female company being busted for tax evasion. Yes. Giving karma time to do its job, do it yourself. I didn't really follow the court proceedings. Hell, I was there only twice, the day I was called on as a witness and the day of the sentencing. The case took 2 years. I dressed in a 2-piece suit, like the meme, dressed for my enemy's downfall. I wanted her to know that I did this to her, and I was there to watch her hopes and dreams burn before her eyes. They took everything from here, even down to the house I left her. The company was shut down completely as they couldn't afford to recount all those years of unpaid taxes, and she, as the manager of finance, and her boss, the COO, were both sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison. As she was escorted out of the court, our eyes met and I had my best evil smile on as I then flipped her off. She bowed her head and I saw a drop of tear fall from her eyes. Look who had the last laugh. Me. I got a call later on, 4 years ago, from an unknown number. It was her. She said she had got out close to 4 months ago and that she wanted to make amends. We met at a KFC on a Saturday evening and talked about everything. She talked about how, when she first started working with the company, she had never seen so many made women in one gathering, how she always thought before then that her biggest achievement was being Mrs. McLean, and how she wanted to be more than just a wife. She said she started seeing a common denominator amongst the women, which was that they were all never married nor did they have kids. She said she thought in order to make it she had to be like them, and that since she was already married the only other thing was to not have children. She saw how they openly condemned having kids and how they said their lives were much better because they didn't have any parasites latching onto them. She said she hated herself for being so naive and impressionable. She didn't have to say it, it was evident in her appearance, posture, and her body. I had noticed some scars and her hands, although she tried to hide them by wearing long sleeves. She said when she got out, she went over to a friend from the office, that what she was when she got there made her hate herself even more. She said the lady was now married with 2 kids aged 4 and 1, and she also had another on the way. She told me that when they had started talking, she had told her how she only remained working there because the pay was good and the benefits even better. The friend of hers told Caroline that she was already engaged to be married and had planned to resign as soon as she got married, until the company was shut down, that is. Caroline went on to talk about what she said was the most painful part of it all. When she asked about the lady who gave her the abortion advice, the lady told her that after the company got shut down by the government she left the country. She said that they had still kept in touch until the lady told her that she was pregnant, aged 41. Caroline told me that her friend from work got angry at the lady who had given the abortion advice, stating that she had given someone advice that helped ruin her marriage only for her to decide she was going to have children, the same children she strongly advised against. She showed me a recording of the words of the lady who gave her the advice. I played it and it went like so, not word for word because it's been a long time, but this was basically what the lady in the recording said. I was really envious of Carl. She was the youngest and still somehow was the one who had life figured out the most. It was a good thing she was such a naive lady. Most of us were miserable. Yes, we were rich, but what good is having all the money in this world if you had no one to share it with? I gave her that advice in hopes that her husband would find out. Not only was she married, but she was married to a literal knight in shining armor. I laughed. To be honest, these were the women she wanted to be like, sad, pathetic, and miserable women. These were the women she betrayed me. I looked at her, she was now like those women, although now she wasn't as rich as they were, she didn't even have anything. I laughed because of how sad it was. She asked about me, how my life was, if I had remarried. I told her that I wasn't. Her eyes lit up for the first time that day. She probably thought we still had a chance. I shut that hope down quickly. Told her I was finally happy, that I had finally moved on. I told her I wished her the best in all her endeavors. I really did. I thought she had suffered enough already. She tried to plead with me to remain in contact, to be friends, so we can see where that led. She told me she still loved me. She said she couldn't stop thinking about what I told her that day I left the house. She had started crying at this point. To be fair, she cried a lot during the conversation. I told her to forget about us rekindling what we had, that was never going to happen, that I don't see the woman I loved anymore, and that I had moved on in the time she had spent in jail. I told her I could help her back on her feet. Moving on was hard. Sometimes when I sleep, I dream about those 7 kids, a dream where they had names, a life, and a future. I have 1 child now, adopted. I'm serious about never getting married again. He's a real gem. God gave me the opportunity to choose a child this time and I chose right. His 10th birthday was just yesterday and he was the reason why I decided to tell the world my story. Thank you guys for reading this. I love the life I've built for myself since I left her. I'm happy now, my son makes me happy.